All right, so today we're going to be talking about getting ready for an interview for an import-export specialist positioned in the wood and construction materials industry. And we've got some great resources here from RoleCatcher, like career guides and interview guides, and even some stuff on their AI tools.
It's a very specific field, so these are going to be really helpful for getting ready.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so first let's just sort of like paint a picture for everybody. Like, what exactly does this role entail? Because you're not just like, driving a forklift around a lumber yard.
Right. No. It's way more dynamic than that.
Right.
You're basically coordinating like a global dance of, lumber, plywood, all these different materials. So you're like logistics, customs procedures. You got to stay updated on like all the industry trends. It's a fast-paced world.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So knowing your stuff is like super crucial.
For sure. And speaking of knowing your stuff, the career guide mentions these things called Incoterms.
Yeah.
What are those?
Yeah, they sound kind of intimidating.
A little bit, yeah.
But they're actually like the secret handshake of international trade. They basically lay out who's responsible for what in a global transaction. So it's kind of like a universal rule book. Right. So let's say, for example, a shipment of, Brazilian hardwoods gets damaged at sea. The Incoterms determine who takes the hit for that.
Okay, so it's all about like clarity and minimizing risk.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So now let's get into, I guess, the real meat of this deep dive, which is like the interview questions. So we're going to kind of like break these down into some groups and give you some strategies for how to like tackle each type.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's start off with like questions about your experience, because those are obviously designed to like, assess your knowledge and skills.
Right.
So let's say they ask you something like, can you describe your experience with customs regulations and procedures? Like, what's the best way to approach that kind of question?
Okay, this is your chance to really showcase your expertise. All those acronyms that the guide mentioned, like ITAR, EAR, FTR. Drop those confidently.
Yeah.
But make sure you can back them up. Really show that you understand all the ins and outs of all those regulations.
Don't just like list them off. Like I know ITAR, EAR, and FTR.
Exactly.
Get like concrete examples.
Right.
Like I once had to classify a shipment of oak flooring for export into the year.
Exactly. And be ready for those follow-up questions.
Yeah.
They might say, okay, well, how did you determine the correct ECCN for that oak flooring? So be prepared to like walk them through your thought process.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's all about showing, not just telling.
Right.
Okay, so what about a question like, what experience do you have working with international suppliers and vendors?
Okay, so this is where you really want to highlight your global network and your ability to like build those relationships across borders. So you want to talk about, your experiences negotiating with suppliers in different countries. Maybe you scored a great deal on some Canadian lumber, or, you navigated a tricky situation with a vendor in China.
Yeah, and don't forget to mention any like language skills or cultural sensitivity training you might have. Like those all add to your global expertise, right?
For sure. Definitely.
Okay, cool. So now let's move on to questions about those Incoterms that we touched on earlier. A typical question might be something like, can you discuss your experience with Incoterms and how they affect import and export transactions? Like that feels like a big one.
Yeah, it is.
For an aspiring import-export specialist.
It's kind of a make or break moment, but you really want to go beyond just like the definition and explain how they actually impact like pricing risk and responsibility. Remember that damaged hardwood shipment? You can use that to illustrate how different Incoterms would have played out in that scenario.
Like, for example, you could say, if we'd used CIF Incoterms, the seller would have been responsible for the damaged goods up to the port of destination.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, and be ready for those curveball questions, too. They might ask you which Incoterms are most commonly used in the wood and construction materials industry. So do your research.
Okay, yeah, do your research. It's all about showing them that you are like a pro who's ready to hit the ground running.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about questions that focus on compliance. Because these can be tricky. But they're super important to demonstrate like your ethical approach
Definitely.
to this whole process, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so a question like, how do you ensure compliance with export controls and sanctions regulations? That's where things get serious.
For sure. That's where you really want to showcase your commitment to doing things by the book. So mentioning things like the ERON, the Export Administration Regulations, and OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Assets Control. Those are good starting points.
Yeah, but again, go beyond just like name dropping.
Yeah.
Explain how you've actually applied these regulations in real-world situations.
Right.
Like maybe you had to screen a potential customer against a sanctions list or classify a product under the ER.
All right, and also be ready to discuss how you stay informed about changes to those regulations. They're constantly evolving.
Right.
So you want to make sure you're demonstrating that proactive approach.
Yeah. I like how you keep emphasizing that it's all about like action and staying ahead of the game.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So now let's dive into another type of question, which is the ones that call for storytelling. Because these are your chances to really like shine and let your personality come through a little bit.
Yeah, have some fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. So a question like, can you give an example of a successful negotiation with an international supplier or customer? Like that's where you get to kind of brag a little bit, right?
Yeah, you get to brag a little within reason, of
Of
course.
course, of course.
But, you want to choose a compelling story that showcases your negotiation skills in the context of wood and construction material. So, did you secure a fantastic deal on some Canadian lumber, or maybe you smooth talked your way out of a tricky situation with a Brazilian supplier?
Yeah, but it's not just about the outcome, though. You want to walk them through like your process. How did you prepare? What strategies did you use? What challenges did you overcome?
All those little details,
Yeah.
make it an engaging story.
Yeah, for sure.
And be ready for those follow-up questions too, like, what was the most difficult part of this negotiation, or what did you learn from this experience?
Great point. It's all about showing them that you can think on your feet and learn from your experiences.
For sure.
Okay, so before we move on to the next set of questions, let's take a quick detour and talk about RoleCatcher's AI tools, because these are pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. These are like a secret weapon
Yeah.
in your arsenal for job searching. So, for example, their AI can actually analyze a job description and tell you exactly which skills you should be highlighting on your resume.
Oh, wow. So you're not just kind of like guessing what the hiring manager wants to see.
Exactly.
You're letting the AI do the work for you.
It takes all the guesswork out.
Okay, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And then what else?
And here's another really cool feature is that their AI can also help you practice your interview answers, and then it'll give you personalized feedback. So it's like having an expert coach you on like your your content before you even step into the interview room.
It's like having a personal interview coach available like 24/7.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing. All right, so let's pause here for now, and when we come back, we'll tackle even more of those interview questions and get you fully prepped for this whole import-export adventure.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle more of these interview questions. We've already talked about, your experience in Incoterms compliance. So what else should we be prepared for?
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and focus on questions that are going to assess your problem-solving skills. So these are all about, showing the interviewer how you handle challenges in this like fast-paced global environment.
Okay, so like give me an example.
All right, so something like describe a time you had to deal with a challenging situation involving an international shipment. How did you handle it?
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty classic one, I feel.
It is a classic. And they want to see you in action. So, don't be afraid to share a story where things didn't go perfectly. Maybe a shipment got delayed or there was like a miscommunication with the supplier. What really matters is how you tackled that problem.
Yeah, walk them through your thought process. Like what were the steps that you took? Who did you communicate with? And ultimately, what was the outcome?
Exactly. And don't forget to highlight the lessons you learned. Did you maybe discover a more efficient way to track shipments? Or did you develop some new strategies for communicating with your overseas partners?
Yeah.
Those details are what show growth and adaptability.
Yeah, it's all about turning those challenges into learning opportunities.
Right.
Okay, cool. What about a question like, how do you stay informed about industry trends and market changes that could impact the import and export of wood and construction materials?
Okay, so this one is where you really show them you're not just reacting to the market, you're anticipating it.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about the resources that you use, like trade publications, market research reports, maybe some online forums. What are some key trends that you're following right now?
Yeah, the career guide mentions sustainability as being like a big one.
Yeah.
Are there any others that are specific to wood and construction materials that you've noticed?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Maybe there's a growing demand for like prefabricated housing units or, new regulations that are impacting timber harvesting practices. Share those insights and then connect them back to the import-export process. So you could say something like, I've noticed a trend towards using bamboo as a sustainable alternative to traditional hardwoods. This could open up new sourcing opportunities in Southeast Asia.
Okay, yeah. So you're not just like knowledgeable about the process. You're also like plugged into the bigger picture.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. Now let's talk about some questions that really test your strategic thinking. Something like, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities you see facing the wood and construction materials industry in the coming years?
All right, so this is your chance to really shine as a thought leader. Think beyond the day-to-day operations and consider factors like, technological advancements, geopolitical risks, even shifting consumer preferences. What could really shake things up in the industry.
Yeah, like how might automation impact the demand for skilled labor in like the wood processing sector? Or how could rising interest rates affect construction projects and in turn, the demand for like imported material?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to express your own opinions, but back them up with evidence. This shows you're not just following the crowd, you're critically analyzing all the forces at play.
You're thinking for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on to some questions that assess your process and attention to detail. So something like, imagine you're responsible for importing a large shipment of lumber from Canada. What are the key steps you would take to ensure a smooth and compliant transaction? Like that's almost like a mini case study.
It is, and it's a great chance to show them how you organize your thoughts and prioritize actions. So start by outlining those major steps. Sourcing documentation, logistics, customs clearance.
Okay, and then for each step, you want to highlight the key considerations, like what documents are absolutely crucial, which regulations apply, what are the potential risks. For instance, you could mention the Lacey Act, which prohibits trade in illegally sourced wood.
Exactly. Show them that you really understand the complexities and that you have a system for navigating all of them. So you could say something like, I would start by verifying the supplier's compliance with the Lacey Act and ensuring they have all the necessary permits and certifications.
Okay, yeah, that kind of specificity really shows them you're not just talking the talk, you've actually walked the walk.
Right.
Okay, cool. Now let's talk about questions that dig into your decision-making skills. So something like, tell me about a time you had to make a difficult decision related to an import or export transaction. What were the factors that you considered and what was the outcome? Like those can be tough.
They can be tough, but they're also a great opportunity to really showcase your judgment and your ability to weigh competing priorities. So, maybe you had to choose between a cheaper supplier that had a less reliable track record or a more expensive supplier with a stellar reputation.
Yeah, walk them through your decision-making process. Like what information did you gather? Who did you consult with? What were the potential risks and rewards?
Right.
And don't be afraid to share a story where the outcome wasn't ideal. The important thing is to show what you learned from that experience.
Exactly. It's about demonstrating that you can make those tough calls under pressure.
Yeah.
And, take ownership of the results.
Be accountable.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now let's tackle a question that I feel like everybody dreads, which is, how do you handle stress and pressure in a fast-paced work environment? Like, let's be real. International trade can be kind of a pressure cooker.
Oh, it definitely can.
Yeah.
Shipments get delayed, regulations change, unexpected problems pop up. It's all part of the game. So they want to see that you can handle the heat and stay cool under pressure.
So share your coping mechanisms. Are you someone who's like a master of prioritizing tasks or delegating effectively? Do you take regular breaks to clear your head?
Exactly.
Whatever your strategy is, back it up with some solid examples.
Right.
Like, during a recent shipment delay, I stayed calm and focused on finding alternative transportation options.
Yeah.
While also keeping everyone informed.
That's a great example. It shows them you can be proactive and solution-oriented even when things get a little chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now let's talk about a question that often comes up toward the end of an interview, which is the dreaded salary question. What are your salary expectations for this role? Any advice on how to navigate that one?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Do your research.
Yeah.
Websites like Glassdoor or salary.com can give you a good sense of the typical range for similar positions in your area. And then consider your experience level and the specific responsibilities of the role.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to negotiate.
Oh, yeah?
Be confident in your worth, but also be realistic and flexible.
Like it's a balancing act.
It is.
Okay, cool. Now, before we wrap up this whole deep dive, let's circle back to those RoleCatcher AI tools that we talked about. Because those are pretty cool.
They are very cool.
It's like having a personal career coach in your pocket.
It is.
Okay, so just to remind everybody, what are those tools all about?
Okay, so we've talked about how they can help you tailor your resume and practice your interview answers. But remember, they have tools specifically designed for import-export roles. So they can analyze those job descriptions, identify keywords that you should be highlighting, and even provide feedback on your interview responses based on industry best practices.
So it's all about leveraging those tools
Yeah.
to give yourself an edge in this very competitive field.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take a quick pause here, and when we come back, we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways and some final thoughts. All right, we are back for the final stretch of our import-export interview prep deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground from, those tricky questions to the AI-powered tool. So what are some final thoughts to help our listener really seal the deal?
Well, we focused a lot on the content, you know what to say. But let's not forget about presentation. How you present yourself matters just as much.
Right. It's like that old saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So what are some tips for projecting confidence and professionalism?
Okay, well, first off, dress the part. Research the company culture. A suit might not be necessary in the wood and construction world, but you always want to look sharp and put together.
Yeah, for sure. And don't forget about those nonverbal cues. Like eye contact, a firm handshake, good posture. Those all speak volumes.
Absolutely.
About your confidence and your engagement.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's talk about, I think, a power move that a lot of candidates overlook, which is asking questions.
Yeah.
Because it shows that you're curious, you're engaged, you've done your homework, and it's also a chance for you to kind of gather some intel.
Yeah.
And decide if this company is even the right fit for you.
Right.
So what are some questions that our listeners should have up their sleeve?
Okay, well, think about, the company's growth plans, their approach to sustainability, or even the biggest challenges they're facing in the import-export market.
Yeah, you could also ask about things like, the team dynamics or opportunities for professional development.
Yeah.
Or even their experience working with international suppliers, specifically in the wood and construction industry.
Yeah.
Shows you're thinking long-term and looking beyond just the paycheck.
Exactly.
And then don't forget about just the basic questions like what are the next steps in the interview process? Because it shows that you're, eager and organized.
Right.
Okay, now once the interview is over, don't just ghost them. Follow up.
Yes, always follow up.
Yeah.
A simple thank you email can go a long way.
Right.
Reiterate your interest, mention something specific that you discussed, and just express your enthusiasm for the opportunity.
It shows that you're appreciative of their time.
Yeah.
And that you're serious about the role.
For sure.
Now, even if this particular interview doesn't lead to a job offer, remember, it's a valuable learning experience. So reflect on what went well, what could have been better, and how you can refine your approach for next time.
Right. Every interview is a step closer to landing that dream job.
Exactly. All right, so as we wrap up this episode, what do we want our listener to walk away with today?
Well, you're now armed with knowledge about, what the import-export specialist role entails. You've got strategies for tackling those tough interview questions, and even tips on using those AI tools to your advantage.
Remember, this is a competitive field, but with the right preparation and a proactive mindset, you can definitely stand out from the crowd and launch your career in this really exciting world of global trade.
Absolutely. And one final thought to leave you with. The career guide highlighted the growing importance of technology in things like logistics and customs. So as you embark on this journey, think about how you can stay ahead of that tech curve and leverage all the new tools to become a truly indispensable import-export specialist.
Yeah, the world of global trade is waiting for you.